You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. I have a lot of really cool friends who do a lot of really cool things. I wanted to make it a goal to sit down with these friends and spend about 15 minutes or so getting to know them better and find out about their past, present, and their future. The result is this show. My name is Grant Baciocco, and this is 15 Minutes With. Michael Oosterom is an actor, a puppeteer, an improviser, and today's guest on 15 Minutes With. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hi, Grant. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. You and I have been friends for a long time, and I'm excited to sit down and chat with you a little bit.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the wonderful state of Delaware.
Yeah.
I do, usually is a conversation stopper right there.
And did you live were you there till you left for college?
Exactly. Yeah, we never moved around. I grew up in one house, and then I went off to college in Philadelphia to Temple University, where I majored in theater. But that was only 50 miles north, so it was still in the area.
So it wasn't too far away.
No. Felt far away, but, because it was North Philadelphia, from like cozy little suburb to battle-hardened North Philadelphia. But Temple's like an oasis in a pretty rough neighborhood. But
yeah. Do you remember the first thing that, as a kid, that captured you creatively? Like you're like, oh, wow, this, or the first piece of art or whatever that...
Well, it's funny. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I always point to the first film that really made an impression on me was Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, wow.
It was probably on Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday night back in the 70s, and I just remember being just transfixed by that. And then we had this little swimming pool we went to, so of course I played that, falling off, being grabbed by the octopus and all that stuff. And when I was really little, the thing I did most of anything else was drawing. Drawing was a big deal for me. I didn't really pursue it. I had a comic strip in high school and stuff like that, but I never developed that. I really just did it because it was so much fun for me. Yeah.
Do you still draw today?
No, not really.
No, not really.
Not even doodle. Yeah.
What kind of things were you drawing? Like, were you drawing comic books or?
It's funny. What I was drawing was, monsters and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then as I got into like middle school, I got a little more into fantasy and stuff. And I'd seen I remember John Borman, I think it was John Borman's film Excalibur really transfixed me. So I started doing a lot of like knights and sword and sorcery and fantasy stuff too, dragons and stuff. And then later I realized what I was doing. I wasn't that into comic books as a kid, but I started serializing my drawings. My dad would bring home these books from work. He worked in aerospace, and he'd have these reports, and they were always printed on one side, so the back was blank. And those became my drawing pads, and I started making them like page 1, page 2, page 3. So they were stories that I would tell through these drawings and these little stick figures and stuff I would do. So I sort of was storyboarding films in my head more than just drawing single one-off drawings.
Yeah. You mentioned your dad was in aerospace. Were your parents creative at all?
Honestly, no. No shame in that. My dad is a chemical engineer by education, a program manager for a company called Thiokol that made a lot of stuff for NASA throughout his career in 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And my mother is a registered nurse. They're both retired. And I remember my dad used to always say, one of these days I'm going to get a trumpet. And I'd say, do it, get a trumpet. Call myself Dutch and play the horn. But he just didn't have the impulse or the instinct. They didn't stop me from a creative life. But I remember my dad said, I have no way of knowing how to help you with this acting thing. I'm not going to stop you, but I have no advice for you, which is fair.
Well, I know just from knowing you that with your dad being involved in aerospace, but you also have a huge, I don't want to call it fandom, but you love outer space and the space exploration. And stuff.
I'm a bit of an obsessive about numerous things. Like I always go through these periods, and I'm currently going through a particularly space age history. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I think I took for granted what my father did. He was, like a lot of movie stars say, my dad's Kirk Douglas. He just went off to work and made movies. I didn't realize he was a movie star. Like, I never really quite appreciated how absolutely cool it was. I just found this thing in my house when I was visiting my parents recently, a little medal he got, and it's enclosed in plexiglass, and it's a little coin of the Apollo 8 astronauts, and it was there all my childhood. You turn it over and it said, medal from this coin was on board the command module that flew to the moon and is given to the thousands of, the thousands of people that helped build this thing. So it's really weird. I might be getting back into it, sort of realizing how I'm kind of appreciating what I took for granted when I was younger. And plus, I just think it's a fascinating period in our history where we took those baby steps. Within 9 years from Kennedy saying, we're going to go to the moon, we did it. And it's just an amazing period in history, and I just, there's always something to learn, and I'm just reading books and seeing movies. I just bought 2 movies today at a used record store about the NASA program. I just can't stop myself.
Yeah. Well, when did performing start? Like, do you remember when you got that bug?
Sure, yeah. In my little neighborhood in Delaware, we had the high school I ended up going to, John Dickinson High School, had a really outstanding theater program. And my sister dragged me to see this play called The Monster of Lonesome Lake. And it was like this little potboiler kind of melodrama thing, kind of a mystery. But they had this effect at the end of Act One where the monster showed up, and it was the creepiest thing. She was like in blacklight, upstage center. I still remember the French windows open, and you could see the lake painted in the background. And she was in blacklight, like wet, with that straight kind of 70s Marsha Brady hair and this white gown. And I crawled under my seat. I started screaming my head off, crying. I was so terrified. It was a really creepy effect. But I was also like, that happened. Kids I know did that. My sister's friends did that. And that's just up the street. And it turns out that I ended up going to that high school. And I had some great teachers there, Betty Metz, Tom Sabatino, Michael Vicola. And it was almost like our own little version of Fame. We took it seriously, and she trained us very well. And I just caught that bug. And I remember having a moment, there was part of me that wanted to be the lead and be in the show. But one time I was stage managing a show that was going to the state one-act festival. And I always talk about this. I had this moment, one Tuesday night rehearsal, the actors are working. I'm in a folding chair stage right as a stage manager. I just remember looking around at the ropes and the fly rail, and I just had this feeling like, I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. No matter what capacity, I belong here, particularly in theater, I guess. But so I caught the bug, and I never shook it.
Yeah, and so you made that decision when you went to college, was that I'm going to study theater?
Yes. I chose Temple. Well, I chose a couple other schools I didn't get into, frankly, but I'm very happy and honored to have gone to Temple because it was one of the original League of Resident Theater schools, a very prestigious training program. I went there undergrad. I didn't go there graduate, but I did participate in some graduate productions, worked with the grad actors and stuff, and it was great training, great program. I did a lot of stuff, both official productions and side productions, and met a lot of great people, made friends, and was off to the races.
What are some of your favorite productions that you were involved in?
Well, I was in The Real Inspector Hound, which I know you were in.
Yes.
We did a production of Peter Barnes' Red Noses. I was in my freshman year. I played the lead role in Václav Havel's The Memorandum. And he was, I think, currently under house arrest at that point in Czechoslovakia, and then later became the president of Czechoslovakia. But that led me to work through the stage manager. The director of that was a guy named Ken Wessler. He was also stage manager at one of the few equity theaters in Philadelphia called the Wilma Theater, which is still in Philadelphia. It's run by Blanka Ziska. At the time, it was run by her late husband, Yuri Ziska, and Blanka Ziska. So I got auditioned, and I got cast in a show called Child Byron by Romulus Linney. Just a small part, but it was the first time I'd done more than 3 performances of a show, like in high school. And Joe Papp came and saw that show, and I just really, again, felt like I was on my way to becoming like an equity actor, legitimate theater, really artistic theater, something I was very proud of. I ended up doing 2 more shows with the Wilma before I left college. Is that answer your question?
Yeah. And then after you left, where did you go after Temple?
My girlfriend at the time was finishing at the University of Delaware, so I went back to Delaware for a year and became a stage carpenter at the Delaware Theater Company. Cut the tip of my finger off on the second day of work, so I'm not a natural carpenter. But then while I was at Temple, I just by dumb luck, I didn't participate in any Shakespeare. There were Shakespearean productions, but I was always in the other show. And then a friend at the Delaware Theater Company showed me a notice for the California Shakespeare Festival was having open auditions, and I submitted by videotape and eventually got in as an apprentice. And when my ex-girlfriend graduated, we moved to San Francisco, to the Bay Area. And I ended up doing 3 seasons at Cal Shakespeare. And within those 3 years, I participated in 13 or 14 different Shakespearean productions. So it was almost like going to a grad program without going to a grad program.
Yeah. Yeah, what's it like doing that many productions in that short amount of time?
We had a great director, Penny Metropolis, told us, because you're doing 4 shows per summer, and it's the same people. And we were at each other's throats. And she said a great thing. She said, you know what it's like? I think she got this from someone else. She said, it's like when a family puts on a wedding. They all love each other, but, they're putting on a wedding. It's a lot of pressure. She said, you guys are on your 4th wedding of the summer. It's like, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I realized there's the thing where, and then we would do the shows in reps. So Tuesday night we're doing Merchant of Venice. The next night we're doing Much Ado About Nothing. And, on Tuesday I'm like, that guy bugs me. And then on Wednesday night, I love that same guy. I love that guy. It's like just the relationship you have on stage, what you're doing with or for each other in the show. It's grueling, but it's like swinging with a lot of bats. At the end of 3 years of that, you're like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm ready to do more.
Yeah. And where did you go? Because you kind of stayed in San Francisco for a while.
I did.
Right?
I got seduced by the beauty of San Francisco. And what was a very vibrant, I think it still is, a very vibrant both equity theater scene, and then there's all these great theater. I was part of a theater company called Central Works in Berkeley. I did something with the Magic Theater, which was still kicking around. It still is, I think. The Eureka Theater. I was in it for the art, and there was a lot of great art up in San Francisco. I know I should have, quotes, go to New York or Los Angeles, and I eventually did move to Los Angeles after, turning 30 and going, what did I do? But the Bay Area is such a great place to be, and certainly was then, that I got seduced and stuck around.
And was it in, I'm assuming it was, because that's where I saw the performance, but Picasso, the Steve Martin play, Picasso at the La Pan Agile.
Picasso at La Pan Agile, by Steve Martin.
You were in that. You were in.
I was. That was the original production. That was Steve Martin had developed it at Steppenwolf under the direction of Randall Arney, and they had gone to L.A. They played the Geffen Theater in L.A. and they'd gone to New York and had won an Obie or a couple of Obies and stuff. And then so that's the core original production. It came to San Francisco, and then one by one the New Yorkers went home and they filled out the cast with San Franciscans. So I took over the role of Schmendeman, who's the third genius idiot who bursts in towards the end of the play, and then understudied the role of Einstein and the visitor, spoiler alert, Elvis. And then when it came time to do a national tour, they took us San Franciscans and we toured the country with it, which is, again, the first time I'd gone on a long tour like that, and I learned what that's like. I learned to hate air travel.
How many cities did you do on that tour?
Yeah, that's a good question. We went up and down the Eastern Seaboard. We played, mostly it was, I seem to recall it was on the East Coast, Baltimore, a couple gigs in Florida. We were on the road for about 6 months. We played L.A. We came down to L.A. We were all over the map. It got cut a little short because of financial reasons, but it was a great experience.
Now, and I just know from talking to you, you met Steve Martin during that time.
Sure.
And he was around. What's it like? I mean, I always think it's funny when you know the playwright and the playwright's watching, but then also having the added pressure of, oh, by the way, the playwright is Steve Martin.
Yeah, and the Schmendeman, for those who know it, is basically the wild and crazy guy comes in.
Right.
Like, for those Steve Martin fans, are like, where's the wild and crazy guy? He kind of shot Schmendeman in there to deliver the goods on the crazy and the zany. I was terrified the night he came. And I remember he came back to the dressing room and he just simply said, oh, you're great. You're funny. Like, oh, thank God. And then when I came back a couple days later, they said, Steve thought you're great, but you're getting a new costume. So I had a really lovely brown suit with a derby. I looked like John Cleese a little bit, a Ministry of Silly Walks. And then I had this absurd, yellow plaid hunting costume, which almost did the work for me. I would enter and hold for the laugh, because it was just this stupid costume. And the meeting him was interesting because it gave me a little taste of what fame was like. Because whenever he would come see us on the show, on the tour, he would come to town, maybe check out the show. He would rent the back of a restaurant somewhere and take us for a lovely meal and talk to us. We were walking from the theater in San Francisco down the hill there in Theater District to some restaurant, and he had this pink baseball cap to disguise himself. First of all, it was a pink cap, but let alone, he's Steve Martin. And I'm walking with him, still a little nervous to be talking to him and whatnot. I remember a group of guys were coming the other way, and one guy goes, hey, that's Steve Martin. That's Steve Martin. He's Steve Martin. And as we passed, I guess his friends didn't believe him, so he grabbed Steve Martin's shoulder and kind of lightly spun Steve around to show his friends he was Steve Martin. And I thought, maybe I don't want to be famous.
Yeah.
Because that's horrible.
Yeah.
How dare that guy do that?
Yeah, you don't touch anybody, let alone...
Anybody.
Yeah.
So...
Well, after San Francisco, you moved to Los Angeles, and that was just, I'm going to continue acting?
Try the film, television, crack that nut. And I started taking classes at the Groundlings. I started taking all the levels at the Groundlings, and I was doing pretty well. I was banging through whatever they were at the time, basic, intermediate, writing lab, I think. And then, frankly, my unemployment claim ran out. And a good friend of mine, Vinny Doremus, who I do a podcast with called Nerd Like Me. Check it out.
Link in the show notes.
Yes, thank you. He had a day job at Jim Henson's Creature Shop. When she'd gotten through a friend, and they needed someone to answer the phone for a week. And 11 years later, I left the Creature Shop as a puppeteer and Puppet Up. And as the ex-production manager of the Creature Shop, I learned a lot about budgets and made stuff for Kanye West and other clients, did stuff at the Grammys. So I got sucked into a thing that turned into something wonderful.
Did you ever, because it's kind of like me, I was always a fan of puppets and Jim Henson, all different kinds, but I never thought I'm going to be a puppeteer. And was that, when you look back at that now, do you think like, wow, it's weird that I ended up as a puppeteer?
It is really weird. Like when there's a point during the company's history when the Muppet puppets had been kept in New York, and then they decided to shift them to Los Angeles. And my boss at the time said, hey, here's another thing you're going to do. You're going to manage the room that the Muppets are kept in. You're going to manage the physical puppets, the comings and the goings when they need them. You're going to track them, ship them, all that stuff. And that was like 2 or 3 years. I didn't even touch them. I would bring the box to the Wranglers and say, here's Kermit, here's Piggy, because I respected them so much. And I had no impulse to be a puppeteer. But then I was visiting my family back in, my brothers in Delaware, and we got snowed in. And my nephew Max, he was like a little guy, like 2 or 3, and we were just bored out of our minds. The cable TV was out, we had to talk to each other. And he had this little chimpanzee puppet that I just started goofing around with. And I learned that I could make him look extremely sinister and just stare people down and then raise his little arm up like he was about to smack you in the face. And my wife, Zachary, said, you should be a puppeteer. I'm like, that's crazy talk. It's like, gee, if only you worked in a place where there were some puppets that you could ask to practice with and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I never thought about it. I have great respect for it, and I kind of, again, stumbled into that, too. I think it was because it was Puppet Up, the improv puppet show, and I'd had Groundlings training, and I knew the puppet people. I used to set up the workshop for Puppet Up and then leave and go, that looks like fun. I wish I could try that. Mm-hmm. But it all worked out because here I am.
Yeah. And over the years, you've worked on a lot of great things, both with the Jim Henson Company and with, not with the Jim Henson Company.
Yeah.
Kind of coming full circle, you got to work on the recent Muppets TV series.
I did.
So that's pretty amazing. Yeah,
that was pretty amazing to think that again, I used to box these puppets up and take care of them, and now I'm actually not just manipulating them, but doing them in character. The great thing when you're a background performer in the Muppets, the main performers are right there, and they very happily and in a friendly manner give you notes on how Beaker would move or how Link Hogthrob would move. I remember Steve Whitmire gave me a great note on Link Hogthrob. I was just being him. He said, tip his head down just a little bit. He's a bit of a snob. I'm like, of course, he's a snob. And it's really challenging. One thing I think, if I dare say, one compliment I got from a longtime Henson person, Jane Gutnick, was that I as a puppeteer, I take pauses and I listen. And I thought, well, that's kind of what I felt was my strength as an actor. I was taught that acting is reacting. And I'm always pleased to be a background Muppet performer and just keep them keep them alive. Even if they're not doing much, just keep them alive and be present. And it's a great acting challenge, and it's my small contribution to the Muppets at this point. And I love doing it.
Now, in addition to the puppetry, you also have other creative things. You recently did a web series that you kind of funded all your own and did all your own. And what was that experience like?
Well, my wife had a great idea. We love animals, domestic animals, pets and stuff. And she has had instances in public where she sees someone possibly being a little ignorant about their treatment of their pet or their animal or whatnot. So she decided she sort of forced me to do this. She wanted to create a superhero who's a crazy cat lady, but when she tries to correct someone's pet behavior in a friendly way, gets shot down and comes back as this kick-ass, literally almost inspired by the movie Kick-Ass, and the comic superhero. So it's called Advocat, and we only did 3 episodes because, like you said, I did put up my own money for it. Kind of hoping that maybe someone might come along and co-fund some future ones, and who knows, it might still happen someday. But there's short little episodes, and I got some great friends from the Groundlings, people from the Groundlings to play my villains. Colleen Smith, who's also in Puppet Up, is in it. Jordan Black, Kenny Stevenson. It was great fun. I always also wanted to be a film director. Life didn't take me that way, at least not yet. So it was also a time where I just paid for everything myself. Small scale, but paid for it. Had a great producer in Chelsea Pickens, who I met at the Creature Shop. She'd been to film school for real, so she told me what to do. And it was a great experience, and I hope to do something like that in the future. But I also learned, don't make a web series, make a short. Because then people want more of a web series.
Right.
That's another pile of cash.
When's the next one coming out?
Yeah.
You also mentioned that you have a podcast. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Again, same guy, Vinny DeRamus, my good friend, who got me the job at the Creature Shop. He was offered the opportunity to develop a podcast at a place that he works. And while they decided to go on without us, they let us retain the name and everything of the podcast. It's called Nerd Like Me, and it's basically like a lot of other podcasts. It's us talking about some of our favorite things, nerd, sci-fi related. I sometimes commandeer the conversation to talk about NASA. But that's our podcast, and we hope to bang out some more soon. We kind of took a hiatus for a little while I've been traveling and working in different places, but we were eager to get back at it.
What's something that you're into now creatively that you think other people should check out?
Like something I do creatively?
Yeah, or you're enjoying some piece of art you're enjoying creatively, or...
Well, to be honest, I don't know if I think everyone should do this, but I've just gone a little guitar crazy late in life. I've been shopping for guitars. Literally today, I had a guitar in my hands at a store that is about $300 more than what I planned on spending. And then the savvy employee came over and said, "Sounds good." I'm like, "All right, buddy. All right, relax." But I'm thinking about actually, like, I'm self-taught from the internet and everything, and I just play along to things I like. And I'm fairly pleased with myself, but I know I'm a total hack and an amateur. But I'm thinking about upgrading my gear and taking some lessons. So I'm getting into music and stuff. It's funny, in midlife, as I am, I'm kind of learning the difference between, like, getting into an artistic career or a creative career where you're guided by a lot of ambition, which is good. You need that when you're young. But ego is a bit more involved. And if you stay in this business long enough, your ego is going to take a beating no matter who you are. And what's left? Well, what's left is, why did I really do this in the first place? And I'll go back to that moment when I was not the star of the show in high school, but I was sitting on a folding chair watching other people rehearse. And that was my crystalline moment of, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be here. So like someone telling someone yesterday, guitar is something that I give myself no pressure to be good at. I really kind of just do it because I really enjoy doing it. It's too late for me to become a guitar god. So it's great. There's no pressure to be a guitar god. I'm just going to play for myself.
Yeah. Well, Michael, if people want to check you out online, where can they go?
Oh, I have a great arrangement with the good folks at GoDaddy for a website, which I just upgraded last night, michaeloosterom.com. And that is www.michaeloosterom.com.
Excellent. We'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Michael, thank you so much for talking to us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Grant.
Michael Oosterom is an actor, puppeteer, improviser, and podcaster. Visit his website over at michaeloosterom.com. That's michaeloosterom.com. You can also find a link to his website in the show notes for this episode over at GrantCast.com. 15 Minutes With on the GrantCast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and is made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Merle Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Stephen Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Chuck, Matthew Wayne Selznick, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Baciocco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wobschall, Twitter user Butzengear, a.k.a. Wildcat, Eve Cunning, Mike Hamilton, Gaston Marino, and Reed Loveland. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your donation today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave us a review in iTunes. And while you're over in the iTunes podcast directory leaving your review, be sure to click that subscribe button. That way, when new episodes are released, you will get them immediately. If you have any feedback for the show, you can send it to me directly at grant@throwingtoasters.com or get in touch via Twitter, where my username is ToasterBoy. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will talk to you next time. The GrantCast is copyright 2016 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.